Just wanted to add a couple of thoughts to this week's kind of messy questions. The first question on Kolb's experiential learning cycle, asking you whether or not you really thought it was a cycle or a true cycle in the nature that we go through every stage and usually have a progression through those stages, or was it more of a model? And what did you really think about it in terms of its relevancy in light of some of the other resources you had this week to review? The second question, which was also just a little bit messy because we did a Prezi to present our thoughts from the chapter. When I looked at this chapter and saw so many really deep, somewhat esoteric types of concepts, I didn't really want to just ask one question. And so I did ask one question, but I asked you to reflect on what resonated with you, meaning there could have been so many different types of responses. And it made it a little bit messy, but most of you did a pretty good job organizing this on the Prezi. So I want to take this first question here on Kolb's learning cycle and just talk about a couple things. As some of you noted in the text, it's showing it as a circle, and then we have another drawing with it going across like this. And a couple of you mentioned that you Google Kolb's learning model or Kolb's learning cycle, and you saw all kinds of images like this. And I say this one is probably the least helpful in that it's like learning styles. In what way? It almost looks like if you're just reading it without any kind of explanation, that you kind of pick a place to fit in as opposed to a model for the way that you might learn a concept. So the one, as I was kind of Googling through here in your text, I actually don't think it's a very good model inside of the text, is this one or this one. They're basically from the same website. But if you take a look at this one, and in fact, I've got it opened up right here. This has a better diagram in terms of the arrows. So there's not like a cycle in terms of like an actual entry. And in fact, I called a researcher, a colleague of mine at the University of Idaho, and she has been doing some work on abstract conceptualization and concrete experience with Kolb's cycle. And quite honestly, I was not ever really super thrilled with it. It felt like it was a cobbling together of all the other learning theories, which in fact it is. It is actually a way that brings a lot of the different learning theories together in one place to help with adult education. But one thing that she said to me that resonated somewhat is she said they've been doing a lot of research on learners who really want to start here with a concrete experience. That's their way that they want to begin their learning. And then there are some who really just want to think about it. They want to cogitate, if you will, and take things that are quite abstract. A few of you commented that you didn't feel like people could really learn without actually doing or having active experimentation. But there are many concepts, things like electricity, things that are invisible to us. Electrons, electricity, molecules, those kinds of things are very abstract. And quite honestly, for those who really prefer to start here with a concrete experience, you sometimes start with a model to get to progress through these different aspects of learning the concept. So it's showing these arrows going around this direction. I'm not sure that that's always the case. But this research colleague of mine discussed the idea that some people come in here and they're very comfortable. This is where they feel like they need to be progress through the learning, and others come in through an abstract conceptualization or thinking about how something might work, and then might do some active experimentation. And here's what I like about this. These arrows going across and maybe jumping through here to reflective observation, watching what's going on, maybe coming back to abstract active experimentation, maybe coming back through it, then maybe having some sort of concrete experience involving some sort of feeling or emotion. So I feel like Kolb's learning styles is really more of a, this is calling it a style, I think really more of a model for the way that we can take all of the different learning theories and put them in one kind of tidy package, if you will, for how we might learn and have that reflective practice, which there's quite a bit of research on this, that reflective practice is just so important. So those were some of my comments. I give you some individual feedback on this topic. And I don't really feel like it's a true cycle in the sense of the world. There's progression, but I do think there's some back and forth. There was also a great deal of discussion on learning cycles. So let me bring that over here just a moment. All right. So I just grabbed primarily in whichever group Kari and Tasha and Alicia were in. I think they may have been in, yeah, I can't remember, group 5. But they had a very interesting discussion in that group. Let me bring this down just a little bit. Kari had this question. Does whether or not your learning styles are a valid way to categorize a learner's does it matter to you when you design your curriculum? In other words, are you putting that in your thought process as you go down looking through your curriculum? And Tasha said this, for me, the answer is no, mostly because I don't feel like learning styles are valid. So I don't think anything about them when I design a lesson plan or curriculum. For my field of work, I usually have guidelines for the types of curricula I write, which take into account various methods of learning activities, but I don't think about the learning style. And then Alicia adds on here, I think that you need to be aware of the styles, but not rely on them on the different types of styles. I think that we as teachers need to just find the best way to present the piece of material in a way that students can grasp the information. And so these three little posts right here I thought were really a good way to kind of sum up what Daniel Willingham had to say about learning styles, that they don't really exist, and that the best way to really think about curriculum and instruction is here's the content, here's the context. What is the best way to communicate that? What type of authentic learning will bring that learner through? Perhaps we can go back here into this true learning cycle or understanding of the concepts, whether it's something starting from a very concrete kind of feeling kinds of thing, or are they starting over here in the experimentation, the active and just doing it, and then they get kind of an emotional or feeling about that through this concrete experience, and then have maybe some reflective observation and coming back and back and forth and through different things here. The other parts of this model are this accommodation or feel that you can do, and the diverging and the assimilating and the converging. And this is all the way of basically processing the concepts that you have. So I really like the idea of what Tasha said. It's really not so much, and also Alicia said, not so much that we really think about making sure that we cover XYZ learning cycles, but learning styles, but that we have the right learning strategies for the content within the context for the learner. And that might be, for example, in CTE, a lot of what we're teaching, the concepts, the content involves some sort of physical thing that has to or needs to be manipulated. And so active experimentation is oftentimes the best place to start. But if you were dealing with something like something that was quite abstract, maybe it is electricity, you might say to yourself, well, think about this and have some sort of visualization before you actually could maybe move them through doing some experimentation, and then maybe getting them to understand through a concrete experience what electricity might be, and then reflecting and observing on that. So those were a couple of good comments on learning styles. Remember this also, that experiential kinds of things are not always hands-on. Sometimes, for example, an experience for music might be listening to it. It doesn't, just because I don't play an instrument doesn't mean that I don't have an experience with music. The best way is not doing something hands-on necessarily with a flute or a harp or a drum. Perhaps the best way for me to experience music is by not doing something with my hands, but doing something with my ears. So that is a little bit of a, I don't know, closure, if you will, on Kolb's learning model, even though this picture says styles, because I believe it came from, businessballs.com. And so they use a lot of this type of this model in, as I mentioned before, in adult trainings in the business world and the HR world. All right, let's shift then and take a look at the Prezi. And you were asked to do three things here. Create a topic, and most of you did that nicely in a nice circle. And then to add an image or a web link. There were some great videos. Many of you shared the same video on, which one was it? Intuition. And then add to someone else's circle, just a piece of content, something that you took away that resonated with you, because there were so many of that was just really like interesting concepts, sayings in that chapter. It was very hard to have just like one thing that I really wanted to focus on. So you worked on a Prezi. Everybody had a post, and this is the different groups. And I don't, I went through the rabbit hole of a few of the different videos, clicking through the different kinds of posts, but mostly I read the quotes. And if I did start down a video, it was, some of them I did get a little sucked in, but just to see what the concept was about. But some of you had the most interesting quotes and images that you put into your prezzies. Many TED Talks. Oh, intuition. That one was in a couple of different prezzies. Understanding the role of intuition in teaching. Tacit knowledge. Oh, many of you picked tacit knowledge, and some of you picked that one. I'm going to go back there. A lot of you, say in two groups, missed the linking theory to practice, but really just focused on just these conceptual kinds of things like embodied learning and so forth. So that's group ones. Group two, and I don't really need to go through all of these, but they had a lot of interesting posts and spin-offs from one another. And in fact, I think I just have one little clip that I grabbed here. There's group twos and group threes with all kinds of drawings and little links out to various movies. Group four also had, I think this is the one that had several TED Talks. Many of you talked about body language and had different kinds of clips. Oh, emotions. There were two groups that talk about the emotional part of body and spirit learning. Intuition. This is the TED Talk, The Power of Intuition on YouTube. This video was shared by at least 3 groups. Tacit knowledge. And tacit knowledge is fascinating because it's like, what is it that we know what we should and should not do, and how does that happen? It's actually a soft skill that you think that people grow up with and have culturally. But I think one of you mentioned that this is something that really has to be worked on when you have so many different cultures in a location as to what might be acceptable. And then this is the final one here, group 5, and I'm probably making a lot of you seasick going through here, but there were just to show you the different types of posts. Some people got really into it and made multiple posts. That's fine. That's great. It's awesome. But this was a kind of a fun way for me to just get with a very visual way what the takeaways were for you, and it forced you to kind of look at the content through your own personal lens and really kind of digest and delve into one topic. So I hope that this wasn't too much stress for you. If you're new to Prezi, I find each semester that I do this, it just gets easier and easier for students, but it's a nice way to have a concept web to bring those things together. Where's that final quote that I have right here? This one was by Jacob Christensen, and I just did a little copy paste out of the group that he was in, which is group 1, Prezi 1. We are immersed in an embodied world in which we lived is always greater than the known. We are immersed in an embodied world in which the lived is always greater than the known. And so I thought this was a really interesting quote because it talks about our world. We've already lived through it, and that's always going to be greater. That experience that we're connecting to is always going to be greater than what is known. And so that also resonated with me. So those are my comments for this week on body spirit learning and also on Kolber experiential learning. In career and technical education, we really focus on those kinds of things. And coming back here one more time, just keep in mind that there are going to be other pieces to that pie besides just the doing. You're going to have to be explicitly connecting with that learner to get them to think about it in conceptual ways. How does this apply in different ways? How can I transfer it to different types of learning? And that's going to come with some reflective types of activities that you do with them in the classroom. All right, those are my comments for week 6. Good job, everyone. It was really fun to see what resonated with you in terms of the body and spirit learning, and I look forward to our final week together where we're going to do the last chapter, and that chapter is on critical thinking and critical perspectives.